I never expected my life to unravel over a post-it note. You know those small yellow squares people use for quick reminders? Yeah, one of those was about to turn my world upside down. My name is Jamie, and until last Tuesday, I thought I had it all figured out. Great career, loving husband, and the kind of life that made other people wonder how I managed to keep all the plates spinning. Spoiler alert, I didn't. I just returned from a 3-day business trip to Chicago, dragging my wheeled suitcase through our quiet house at 11 p.m. The lights were off, except for the dim glow of the kitchen under cabinet lighting we always left on. That's when I saw it, a yellow square stuck to the refrigerator door. Need some time to think. Don't wait up. 8 words. That's all Ethan left me after 12 years together, 5 of them married. I stood there in my wrinkled blazer, still wearing my uncomfortable heels, staring at his handwriting until the letters started to blur. Ethan. I called out anyway, my voice echoing through our empty house. No response, of course. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. Hey, it's Ethan. Leave a message. Hey, just got home. Got your note. Call me when you can. I tried to keep my voice casual, like I wasn't standing in our dark kitchen at nearly midnight, talking to his voicemail while my stomach tied itself in knots. I kicked off my heels and walked through the house, flipping on lights as I went. Everything looked normal, almost too normal. His laptop was missing from his usual spot on the coffee table, but otherwise, there were no signs of. What? What was I even looking for? My phone buzzed, and I nearly dropped it in my rush to check the screen. But it was just a text from Helen, my mother-in-law. Hope you had a safe flight home, sweetheart. Lunch tomorrow. I stared at her message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Helen had been more of a mother to me than my own in the past few years. She'd know if something was wrong with Ethan, wouldn't she? Instead of replying, I walked upstairs to our bedroom. Ethan's side of the closet looked untouched, his suits hanging in their usual order. His dresser drawers were closed, his watch still on the nightstand. Everything seemed fine, except for the gnawing feeling in my gut that nothing was fine at all. I changed into one of his old t-shirts, a habit I'd picked up years ago, and sat on our bed, scrolling through my phone. No new messages from Ethan. No missed calls. Just that stupid yellow post-it note downstairs, mocking me with its vagueness. The last time I'd seen him was Sunday morning, before I left for my flight. We'd had coffee together, talked about his mother's upcoming doctor's appointment, made plans for the weekend. Everything had seemed normal. Hadn't it? But now that I thought about it, there had been something off in his smile when he kissed me goodbye. A hesitation in his hug that I'd brushed off as early morning sluggishness. The way he'd lingered in the doorway watching me load my suitcase into the Uber. My phone buzzed again, another text from Helen. Ethan mentioned he might be working late this week. Everything okay? I felt my chest tighten. Working late? Since when did Ethan work late? As an IT consultant, he usually kept regular hours, often working from home. Something wasn't adding up. I typed back quickly, just got home. Everything's fine. Lunch tomorrow sounds great. But as I lay there in our too-empty bed, staring at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above me, I knew I was lying. Nothing was fine. That little yellow post-it note was just the beginning, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew our life together was about to change forever. I just didn't know how much. The hospital corridor smelled like artificial lemons and broken promises. I'd come straight from work to visit Helen, still wearing my power suit like some kind of corporate armor. The text from the hospital had arrived during my morning meeting. Helen had been admitted after a bad fall. Jamie, sweetheart. Helen's face lit up as I entered her room, though I could see the pain behind her smile. She was propped up against stark white pillows, looking smaller than usual in the hospital bed. You didn't have to rush over. Of course I did. I leaned down to hug her, careful of the 4 in her arm. Have you heard from Ethan? I tried calling him. A flicker of something, confusion, concern, crossed Helen's face. He stopped by briefly this morning. Said he had some work emergency. She paused, studying my face. Is everything all right between you two? I busied myself arranging the flowers I'd brought, buying time to steady my voice. Why do you ask? Mother's intuition, maybe. Helen reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. He seems distracted lately. Not himself. He left me a note last night, I admitted, sinking into the visitor's chair. Said he needed time to think. Hasn't been home since. Helen's monitor beeped steadily in the background as she processed this. That doesn't sound like my son. No, I agreed. It doesn't. My phone buzzed, a text from Ethan, sorry about last night. Crazy work situation. Talk soon. I showed Helen the message. She frowned, her fingers tightening around mine. Jamie, there's something. The door opened, and a nurse walked in with Helen's medication. The moment shattered like glass, whatever Helen had been about to say lost in the routine of vital signs and pill cups. Mrs. Lark, how's your pain level? The nurse asked, checking Helen's chart. Oh, manageable, Helen said, but I saw her wince as she shifted position. Though I wouldn't say no to something stronger. While the nurse adjusted Helen's medication, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Greg. Hey, you guys free for dinner Friday? Megan's making her famous lasagna. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Greg and Megan had been our friends since college, but the thought of pretending everything was normal made my stomach churn. Who's that? Helen asked after the nurse left. Greg. Dinner invitation. Go, Helen insisted. You need to get out, not sit here watching me sleep. Besides. She paused, that same strange look crossing her face. Maybe Ethan will actually show up for that. Before I could respond, my phone rang, work calling. I stepped into the hallway to take it, watching through the window as Helen closed her eyes. Her face tight with pain that had nothing to do with her fall. When I returned, Helen was holding a small photo album I recognized from her bedside table at home. Look what Ethan brought this morning, she said, patting the bed beside her. Come see. I sat on the edge of her bed, and she opened the album. There we were, Ethan and me on our wedding day, both of us laughing at something off camera. I remembered that moment. Greg had tripped over his own feet trying to take the picture. You know what I see when I look at this? Helen asked softly. I see my son looking at you like you're his whole world. Helen. Let me finish. She turned the page. Another photo, this one from Christmas last year. Ethan and I in matching ugly sweaters, his arm around my waist. Something's wrong, isn't it? Something more than just a note. I stared at the photo, at our smiling faces, trying to pinpoint when things had started to change. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm going to find out. Helen closed the album, her hands trembling slightly. Jamie, there's something you should know about. Her monitor suddenly erupted in sharp beeps. Helen's face went pale, her hand clutching her chest. I lunged for the call button as she gasped for breath. Help! I shouted into the hallway. I need help in here. As medical staff rushed in, I was pushed aside, forced to watch helplessly as they worked on Helen. My phone buzzed again, another text from Ethan. But this one wasn't meant for me. Megan's lasagna sat untouched on my plate as I watched Ethan check his phone for the 1000th time that evening. We were at Greg and Megan's house for our usual Friday dinner, but nothing about this felt usual. Sorry, Ethan muttered, sliding his phone back into his pocket. Work stuff. On a Friday night? Greg raised an eyebrow. Man, They're working you too hard. I took a sip of wine, remembering the text I'd glimpsed on Ethan's phone at the hospital. The one that wasn't meant for me, miss you already. Can't wait until Friday. Jamie, how's Helen doing? Megan asked, refilling my glass without waiting for an answer. Her hand trembled slightly, spilling a few drops of red wine on the white tablecloth. Stable, I said, watching Megan dab at the stain with her napkin. The doctors say she can probably go home next week. That's great news. Greg smiled. We should all visit her this weekend. Ethan's phone buzzed again. He pushed back from the table. Sorry, I need to take this. As he walked onto the back porch, I noticed Megan's eyes following him. She quickly looked away when she caught me watching. So, Greg said, clearly trying to fill the awkward silence, anyone want dessert? Megan made tiramisu. I'll help you get it, Megan offered, practically jumping from her chair. Through the glass doors, I could see Ethan pacing, running his hand through his hair the way he did when he was stressed. His face was illuminated by his phone screen, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of his expression, not stressed, but smiling. Jamie? Greg's voice snapped me back. You okay? Yeah, just. I gestured vaguely at my barely touched lasagna. Not very hungry. In the kitchen, I heard a glass shatter, followed by Megan's muffled curse. Greg rushed to help her, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the view of my husband having what was clearly not a work call. My phone buzzed, a text from Helen, doctors say I can have visitors tomorrow. Will you come? Bring Ethan if you can find him. The sliding door opened, and Ethan returned, slipping his phone away with that same secret smile. Sorry about that. Where's dessert? Megan dropped something, I said, studying his face. Everything okay with work? Yeah, just a server issue. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Nothing major. Greg and Megan returned with the tiramisu, but Megan's eyes were red, and she'd changed her blouse. Everything okay in there? I asked. Fine. Megan's voice was too bright. Just clumsy me, breaking things. As Greg served dessert, I watched the way Megan's hands shook, the way Ethan kept checking his phone under the table. The way neither of them would look directly at anyone else. Actually, I said, standing up, I should probably go. Helen texted about visiting tomorrow, and I need to review some work documents tonight. I'll stay and help clean up, Ethan said quickly. Too quickly. No, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You should come home. We need to talk. The room went silent. Greg looked between us, confusion clear on his face. Megan suddenly became very interested in her dessert. Can it wait? Ethan asked. I promised Greg I'd help him with his new gaming setup. Did you? I turned to Greg. Did he promise that? Greg shifted uncomfortably. We hadn't really. Right. I grabbed my purse. Thanks for dinner, Megan. The lasagna was delicious. Jamie, wait, Ethan started. No. I cut him off. Either come home now, or don't come home at all. Your choice. I walked out before anyone could respond, but through the front window, I saw Megan grab Ethan's arm, shaking her head slightly. He pulled away, but didn't follow me. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, watching the house. The text from the hospital was still open on my phone, miss you already. Can't wait until Friday. Friday. Dinner at Greg and Megan's. My hands stopped shaking as a strange calm settled over me. Now I knew. Now I could plan. Helen had tried to warn me, I realized. Before her attack, she'd been about to tell me something. Something about her son, and possibly about the woman I'd thought was my friend. Well, they wanted to play games. Fine. Game on. Ethan didn't come home that night. Or the next. Our house felt like a museum of someone else's life, photos on walls, mixed up coffee mugs in the cabinet, his shoes still by the door. I spent Saturday morning in my home office, pretending to work while actually scrolling through months of phone records. The hospital called around noon. Jamie? Helen's voice was weak. Could you bring my gray cardigan from home? The one with the pearl buttons? Of course. I was already grabbing my keys. How are you feeling? Better now that I've seen Greg. There was a pause. He stopped by this morning. Alone. My hand froze on the doorknob. Greg came to see you. He seemed worried. Asked some strange questions about you and Ethan. I found Helen's cardigan in her bedroom closet, neatly hung next to other cardigans that all looked exactly the same to me. As I reached for it, something fell from the pocket, a small, leather-bound notebook. Jamie? Helen was still on the line. Are you there? Yeah, sorry. Just found your sweater. I picked up the notebook, recognizing Helen's careful handwriting. I'll be there soon. I hung up and opened the notebook. The first page was dated 3 months ago. Ethan came by today. Something's wrong, he's not himself. Mentioned trouble at work, but I know my son. This is different. When I asked about Jamie, he changed the subject. Megan dropped by later, asking about him. Said Greg was worried too. But the way she asked. My phone buzzed, a text from Greg, can we talk? Alone? I stared at the message, then back at Helen's notebook. The next entry was from 2 weeks ago. Saw them together at Carlton's cafe. They didn't see me. Ethan was holding her hand across the table. My heart breaks for Jamie. Should I tell her? Would she believe me? Another text from Greg, please. It's important. I texted back, coffee shop on 5th. 30 minutes. Greg was already there when I arrived, fidgeting with a paper napkin. He looked like he hadn't slept. I need to tell you something, he said as I sat down. About Megan. And Ethan. I know. He blinked. You do. Not everything. I placed Helen's notebook on the table. But enough. Greg stared at the notebook, then pushed his coffee aside. Last night, after you left. Megan confessed. They've been. He couldn't finish. How long? 6 months. His voice cracked. She says it's over, but the texts are still coming, I finished. The secret meetings. The lies. He nodded, looking destroyed. I found hotel receipts. Credit card statements. They were together when Helen had her attack. My coffee turned to acid in my stomach. What are you going to do? I don't know. Greg met my eyes. What are we going to do? Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, back off. You don't want this fight. I showed it to Greg. His face hardened. That's Megan's work phone, he said. She thinks I don't know about it. Another text, some things are better left alone. For Helen's sake. My hands started shaking, not from fear, but rage. They were threatening Helen now. Greg, I said, my voice deadly calm, how good are you still with computers? Good enough. Why? I showed him the threatening texts. Because I think it's time we stop playing defense. He studied my face for a moment, then pulled out his laptop. What do you need? Everything. Bank records, emails, phone logs. Especially from their work accounts. I took Helen's notebook back, clutching it like a weapon. They want to play dirty. Let's show them what dirty really looks like. As Greg started typing, my phone buzzed one more time. A message from Helen. The doctors found something on my latest scan. We need to talk. Soon. I looked at Greg, then at the notebook, then at the threatening texts. Time was running out, and I had to choose: protect Helen, expose the truth, or take revenge. Maybe, with the right plan, I could do all three. The doctor's words hung in the air like smoke: stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Helen sat in her hospital bed, calm as ever, while I felt the room spin around me. "How long have you known?" I managed to ask. "A few weeks." Helen reached for my hand. "I didn't want to add to your troubles." My phone buzzed, another work email about the upcoming Thanksgiving conference in New York. I was supposed to give the keynote speech, a career-defining moment. The timing couldn't have been worse. "Does Ethan know?" Helen's silence was answer enough. She hadn't told him, and he hadn't been around to notice. "I'll cancel my trip," I said. "The conference can find another speaker." "Absolutely not." Helen's grip tightened. "I won't have you sacrificing your career. Ethan can take care of me." I almost laughed at that. Ethan, who hadn't been home in days. Ethan, who was too busy with Megan to visit his own mother in the hospital. My phone buzzed again. Greg this time, found something in their emails. "You need to see this. Jamie?" Helen's voice pulled me back. "There's something else you should know." Before she could continue, Ethan walked in. He looked surprised to see me, like he'd been hoping to avoid exactly this scenario. "Mom," he said, barely glancing my way. "How are you feeling?" "Like I have cancer," Helen replied dryly. "But you'd know that if you'd been here when the doctors explained everything." Ethan flinched. "I've been busy with work." I finished for him. "Strange, since Greg mentioned your company's been on holiday schedule this week." The tension in the room could have powered a small city. Ethan's phone chimed, that familiar sound that made my stomach turn. "You should get that," I said. "Might be important." Helen watched this exchange with knowing eyes. "Ethan, why don't you get me some water?" Once he left, Helen pulled something from under her pillow, an envelope. "I wrote this weeks ago, when I first suspected everything. Don't open it yet. Wait until after Thanksgiving. Helen. Promise me." Her voice was steel. "And promise you'll go to that conference." "I have my reasons." My phone lit up with Greg's messages. Email trail shows hotel bookings. Financial transfers. They're planning something over Thanksgiving. Ethan returned with the water, and his phone chimed again. This time, I caught a glimpse of the screen. Everything's arranged for next week. Once she's in New York. The pieces clicked together like a terrible puzzle. They were waiting for me to leave town. Planning something while I was gone. "I should go," I said, standing. "Need to prepare for the conference." "You're still going?" Ethan asked too quickly. "Of course." I smiled, channeling every business negotiation I'd ever conducted. "It's important for my career." "You'll take care of Helen, right?" He nodded, relief visible on his face. "Of course." I hugged Helen goodbye, feeling the envelope crinkle between us. "I'll see you after Thanksgiving." In the hallway, I texted Greg, "Need a favor. How good are you at accessing security cameras?" His response was immediate, "Already on it." "What's the plan?" I looked back through the hospital room window. Helen was showing Ethan her notebook, the decoy one I'd planted earlier, not the real one in my purse. Ethan was falling for it, just like he'd fall for my apparent departure for New York. "They think I'm leaving town," I wrote to Greg. "Let's give them exactly what they want." Another text from Megan's burner phone arrived, "Smart choice about the conference. Some distances are better kept." I clutched Helen's envelope, my decision crystallizing. They thought they were setting a trap, but they just walked into mine. "One more thing," I texted Greg. "Book me a hotel room in New York. Make sure everyone knows about it. Let them think they had me figured out. Let them think I was running away." Thanksgiving was going to be interesting this year. The security footage from our house played on Greg's laptop, showing Ethan and Megan entering at 2 a.m. I watched from my rental car parked across the street, where I'd been since supposedly leaving for New York yesterday. "They're in your bedroom," Greg's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Want me to kill the feed?" "No." My voice sounded strange, even to me. "Keep recording." My phone lit up with a text from Helen's nurse, "Mrs. Lark asking for you. Says it's urgent." I gripped the steering wheel harder, torn between two betrayals unfolding simultaneously. The one in my bedroom and the one at the hospital, where Ethan hadn't visited Helen once since I'd left. "Jamie," Greg warned, "they're accessing your home office computer." Of course they were. The fake financial documents I'd left there would keep them busy. What they didn't know was that every keystroke was being logged, every file access recorded. Another text from Helen's nurse, "Doctor says her condition is deteriorating rapidly." "Greg," I said, "send me the hospital security feed." The split screen on my phone showed two scenes, my bedroom and Helen's hospital room. My husband and his lover rifling through my personal files while my mother-in-law lay alone, fighting for her life. Helen's envelope sat heavy in my jacket pocket, still unopened. "Wait until after Thanksgiving," she'd said. But watching her now, alone in that hospital bed, I couldn't wait any longer. My hands shook as I opened it. "My dearest Jamie. By now you know about Ethan and Megan. What you don't know is why I've been protecting them. The cancer isn't new, I've known for months. Ethan discovered something in the insurance paperwork. Something that could ruin everything. Your company's health insurance, which covers me as a dependent, has a clause about pre-existing conditions. If they discover I knew about the cancer before the policy took effect." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Helen had kept quiet about her diagnosis to protect my career, while Ethan and Megan had been using this information to. "Movement in your office," Greg interrupted. "They're accessing your work emails." On the hospital feed, Helen's monitors started beeping erratically. Medical staff rushed into her room. "Jamie," Greg's voice was urgent, "they're sending emails from your account. Something about insurance fraud." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. They weren't just having an affair, they were setting me up. Using Helen's condition to manufacture a fraud case against me. Once I was discredited and fired, Helen would lose her insurance coverage. My phone rang, the hospital's number. "Mrs. Lark is asking for you," the nurse said. "She's very agitated. The doctor says." In my bedroom, Ethan and Megan were celebrating, champagne in hand. My champagne. My bed. My life. "The doctor says she may not make it through the night." I started the car, then stopped. If I went to the hospital, I'd lose the evidence I needed to stop them. If I stayed, I might lose Helen. "Greg," I said, "send everything to my lawyer." "Everything. Already done." "But Jamie, there's something else." Something in their emails about Helen's original diagnosis. The hospital feed showed Helen reaching for her phone, her hands shaking. My phone buzzed with her message. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I should have told you sooner. The insurance. It wasn't just about me. Check the dates on Ethan's first email to Megan. The day I got my diagnosis. The day your company announced your promotion. The day everything started falling apart." In my bedroom, Ethan raised his glass in a mock toast, unaware he was being recorded. Unaware that his mother was dying. Unaware that his carefully constructed plan was about to backfire. But as I sat there, watching both screens, I realized I couldn't win this one. Not completely. Whatever I chose, justice or mercy, revenge or protection, I would lose something precious. Helen's monitor flatlined. And I made my choice. I walked into my house exactly 36 minutes after Helen's heart stopped. The champagne bottle still sat empty on my bedroom floor, but Ethan and Megan had moved to the kitchen. I could hear their laughter floating up the stairs as I silently made my way to my office. My laptop was still open, emails drafted and ready to send that would destroy my career. Evidence of insurance fraud carefully constructed to look like I'd known about Helen's condition all along. Their perfect plan. I pressed send on my own email, the one containing every recorded minute of their betrayal, copied to the board of directors, HR, and Greg's lawyer. Then I walked downstairs. "You're supposed to be in New York," Ethan said, freezing with a wine glass halfway to his lips. Megan dropped her phone, face draining of color. "Helen's dead." My voice didn't shake. "She died alone because her son was too busy trying to destroy his wife to visit his dying mother." Ethan's face went through a series of emotions, shock, grief, guilt, before settling on something harder. "Jamie, whatever you think you know. I know everything." I pulled out my phone, playing the security footage of them in my office. Every email. Every meeting. Every plan to use Helen's illness to frame me for fraud. Megan stepped forward, hands raised. "We can explain." "Can you explain this?" I played Helen's final voice message, the one she'd recorded just before her heart gave out. Her voice filled the kitchen. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I told them everything. About the original diagnosis, about your plan with Megan. About the real insurance fraud, the one you committed 3 years ago." Ethan lunged for my phone, but I was ready. I stepped back, watching his face contort as his mother's confession continued. "You used my illness twice," Helen's voice accused. "Once to embezzle from your company, hiding the transactions under my medical bills. And now to frame Jamie when she got too close to discovering it." "Turn it off," Ethan growled. "Why?" "Afraid to hear how your mother spent her final hours making sure the truth came out." Megan grabbed her purse, heading for the door, but Greg was already there. He'd been waiting outside, and now he blocked the only exit. "Going somewhere?" he asked his wife. "The board has everything," I said, watching Ethan's face as it all crumbled around him. "The real fraud evidence. The affair. Helen's statement. They're probably reading it right now." Ethan's phone started ringing. Then Megan's. Then mine. "You don't understand," Ethan pleaded, suddenly desperate. "I did it for Mom. The insurance wouldn't cover her experimental treatments. So you stole the money," I finished. "I would have helped you, Ethan. We could have found another way." "And then what?" he spat. "Watch you play the hero while I remained the failing son. Watch my dying mother love you more than me." His words hung in the air, revealing the real betrayal, not just of our marriage, but of himself. My phone buzzed again, the hospital, asking about Helen's arrangements. In the end, she'd chosen me as her medical proxy, not Ethan. Her final act of trust. "The police will be here soon," Greg said quietly. "The board's filing charges." Megan started crying, but Ethan just stood there, staring at the phone still playing his mother's voice. His final message from her, and it was a testimony against him. "I could have forgiven the affair," I said, turning to leave. "But using your mother's death as a weapon? That's something Helen never forgave you for, and neither will I." "Jamie, wait," Ethan called out, but I was already walking away. Outside, the November air was sharp with coming snow. My phone showed dozens of missed calls, the board, the police, the hospital. The next few hours would be chaos. But as I got in my car, I noticed one last unread message from Helen, sent moments before she died. "Remember, sweetheart, sometimes the best revenge is living well." I started the engine, leaving Ethan and Megan to face the consequences of their choices. Helen had taught me that justice and revenge aren't always the same thing. Sometimes they're better. 6 months after Helen's funeral, I stood in her garden, surrounded by the spring flowers she'd planted last fall. Her final gift, blooming in defiance of everything that had happened. The house sale was closing today. Ethan wouldn't be there, he couldn't be, given the conditions of his plea deal. The embezzlement charges had stuck, even if Megan had managed to avoid prosecution by turning state's evidence. "Last box," Greg said, carrying a carefully wrapped photo album to my car. He'd been my rock through all of this, even as he navigated his own divorce from Megan. "Found something you should see," he added, pulling an envelope from his pocket. It was hidden behind Helen's bedroom mirror. The envelope was dated 3 days before her death, addressed to me in her elegant handwriting. Inside was a key and a letter. "My dearest Jamie. By the time you read this, you'll know everything. About Ethan's betrayal, about Megan, about the money. But there's one last thing you don't know, something I've kept hidden for 30 years. The key opens a safety deposit box at First National. What you find there might help you understand why I wasn't surprised by Ethan's actions. Some patterns repeat across generations, but you've shown me they can also be broken. You were the daughter I always wanted. Remember that. Love, Helen." My phone buzzed, a text from my lawyer. Ethan signed the divorce papers. "It's done." I looked at the key in my hand, then at the blooming garden. Helen had known, not just about Ethan's recent betrayals, but about something deeper, older. Something she'd kept hidden until she was sure I was strong enough to handle it. "Want company?" Greg asked, noticing my expression. I shook my head. "This one I need to do alone." The bank was quiet when I arrived. The safety deposit box contained a single manila envelope, thick with documents. On top was another note from Helen. The truth about Ethan's father, and why I never told anyone how he really died. My hands shook as I read the decades-old police reports, newspaper clippings, and Helen's private journals. The pattern she'd mentioned became clear, a history of financial fraud, betrayal, and secrets that had shaped both mother and son. But Helen had broken the cycle. She'd chosen truth over protection in the end, chosen justice over family loyalty. Chosen me. My phone buzzed again, work this time. The promotion I'd been worried about losing had turned into a CEO position at a competing firm. Life had a way of surprising you. As I drove home, I passed the street where Megan now lived alone, where Greg was rebuilding his life, where Ethan had lost everything. The revenge I'd wanted had come naturally, without me having to orchestrate it. Helen had taught me that too. Sometimes justice works best when you step back and let truth do its work. At home, I found one last surprise, a small package from Helen's lawyer. Inside was a set of garden tools and seeds, with a final note. For your new beginning. Some gardens grow better after a fire. I stood in my backyard, holding the seeds Helen had chosen for me months ago, planning for a future she wouldn't see but had helped create. The spring air was thick with possibility. My phone lit up with another text, an unknown number. For a moment, I tensed, remembering those threatening messages from months ago. But this was different. "Thank you for the flowers on Mom's grave. You were a better child to her than I ever was. I didn't respond. Some conversations were better left in the past. Instead, I knelt in the soft earth and began to plant Helen's seeds, understanding finally what she'd meant about patterns and choices. About revenge and grace. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying what hurt you. Sometimes it's about growing something new in the ashes of what was lost. I dug my hands into the soil and began my new chapter, Helen's last lesson blooming around me like a garden after rain.